30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of Face to Face. And Face to Face is one of two different programs that I have the pleasure of hosting and producing live every single week at AccessTV.org studio. Face to Face is a show that's designed to ask the guests the hard questions and give you, the viewers, the answers and information that you deserve to know. This morning on Face to Face, we have a high-ranking former professional sports executive and many of the major league professional sports associations. He's also an author, consultant. He has many different levels of knowledge and expertise in many different topics and subjects throughout the country and throughout the world. The guest this morning on the Face to Face talk show is no other than Dr. Bernie J. Mullin. Good morning, Dr. Mullin. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jonathan. Thank you so much for having me on.
Okay, it's our pleasure, Dr. Mullin. Could you let people know a little bit about your background briefly before we get into our main topics of discussion?
Absolutely. I have a weird accent. I grew up in Liverpool, England, younger than the Beatles, but in the Beatles era. So I grew up talking like that, you know what I mean? And moved to the United States, came as a summer camp counselor to coach soccer in Maine in 1970, and then came to go to grad school in 1973 at the University of Kansas, and I have lived here ever since. So 52 years an American now.
And counting. That's a tremendous honor right there. Dr. Mullin, obviously, when people hear the American dream, everybody have maybe a somewhat of a different concept or a theory or belief of the American dream. I guess the American dream have somewhat changed in people's mindset maybe over the past 50 to 100 years. But when you, in your opinion, when you define the so-called American dream, what would you define as the American dream currently?
I think the American dream, has been interpreted by a lot of people, from the 1930s when it was first coined, was the idea that you get to own your own home. I don't think it's as narrow as that, although that is a manifestation of it. I think really it's about, living the pursuit of happiness. And for me, I had my mom's uncle and my dad's cousin, one who was Canadian, one who was American, as influences. They've spent a lot of time in England when I was a young boy growing up, and they influenced me to believe that it is a better life for my kids and for my grandkids. And in the 52 years I've lived in America, that's what I've been able to achieve. So the American dream for me is a wonderful quality of life and the pursuit of happiness for me and for my family.
Well, Dr. Bernie Mullin, can we say that the American dream is attainable for all people, which is part of your book that you have written and part of what you're trying to promote, or is it more beyond just that towards the American dream?
No, I think we have to say that two things have happened in the 52 years I've lived here. One is the American dream as an aspiration has faded, and that's a problem, I think, and we'll talk about that. But the second part is it was never really attainable for all. I mean, the truth of the matter is that for people with a poorer education, people who are poorer, less income, the American dream isn't possible and hasn't been possible for hundreds of years. And so the main part of the book is how do we make it attainable for everybody? Because I don't think it is there right now. How do we create that opportunity for everybody to enjoy the American dream?
Okay, well, let's just throw away quickly towards the real true definition of what the American dream consists of. And let's just say, for sake, people may have this belief or this misbelief in themselves that if I have somewhat of a decent place to live, I have a flat screen television, I have a nice luxury car parked on the street instead of a home, I'm living the American dream. If I'm fortunate enough to hit the lottery, I'm living the American dream. Now, I know if you compare third world countries to the United States, even someone living in an impoverished section of our country would be viewed towards a third world country as the so-called American dream. You have free schooling, you have a tremendous safety net systems that provides a safety need for all of its U.S. citizens and all of the people that live in the country. Or is that not really a so-called American dream?
Well, I think it is. It's probably not what most people define as an American dream, Jonathan, but it is. I mean, you've got people who are willing to walk, hitchhike on trains, or however they get here, all the way through Central America, thousands of miles. You've got people willing to jump in very unsafe boats to come out of Caribbean islands and come to the United States. So people are willing to die to get here. And we should never forget that. I mean, I think we take America for granted, whether we're living the dream or not, in many cases. And I don't think we should do that. So, you know, my company that I sold last year operated in 11 countries around the world. I mean, I'm European originally. I've had experience of living and working around the world. And you see what other people call quality of life versus what we have here. And you've already, enumerated them. I mean, do I think somebody living in the hood where their children go out the front door and they're in danger of being recruited as drug mules and later on as members of the gang, that they're living the dream? No, I don't. That single parent, teenage pregnant female, who has to work two jobs just to basically subsist, and most of the food that she's able to provide for her kids are from a food desert out of a can. No, they're not living the American dream. And that's what the book is all about, is how do we create that for everybody? And really it's two things. It's money and it is education. And so in the book, the first part of the book is me moving from state to state with the sports jobs that I have, going to grad school in Kansas, then teaching at the University of Massachusetts, then working for the Pirates, working for the Rockies, working in hockey, working for David Stern at the NBA in New York, working with the Hawks and the Thrashers in Atlanta, and building my own business. So it's moving around there and what I'm learning, and I hate politics, but as I start to see the impact of politics, it talks about what I've learned in each of those different areas as I've grown more socially conscious. And then the last part is Pew Research, the top 10 issues that Americans vote on. So that we just had a presidential election in November. And why did people vote in President-elect Donald Trump? and it's not hard to figure it out. It's all the issues that everybody talks about. It's the economy, inflation, number one, jobs, number two, it is education for our kids, it is immigration, it is crime, it is all the things that people talk about. And so the American dream is really solving those issues for most people. And it's really about opportunity. It's about how do we give everybody the opportunity to maximize their talents. And I think that one of the major things that we get hung up on wrongly, and I have to be very careful when I make the following statement, is that most of our discussion about politics and society is about equality. And I understand that and respect that. Whoever you believe is the creator of the universe, I'm a Christian, so I believe it's God, but whatever the force is that created the universe, we need to create everybody with equal opportunity, recognizing that we're all different. We're different in our talents. So the idea that we're solely on 100% focused on equality really doesn't make sense. It's also not what America's about. America's a capitalist country. We want to provide the opportunity for you to use your talents, maximize your talents, and create the quality of life that you're willing to work for. And so it's about opportunity, and opportunity starts with education. So in the book and in the foundation I've created, the Aspire Difference Foundation, it's about giving everybody the chance through free preschool. We need free preschool. That's $100 billion a year in America. It's about what we're spending in the loans and the money that we've given to Israel, to Gaza, to Ukraine. So let's invest that on young people, all young people, not just those who are marginalized and at risk, because that's where we get into trouble. That's where the extreme right gets PO'd at the extreme left, is that we're giving people free stuff again. Give everybody the same opportunity and the same free stuff so that they can read and write by the time they're in kindergarten, because the research shows that people who can't read at third grade level by the time they're in the third grade are 5 times more likely to get involved with teenage pregnancy, 5 times more likely to be involved in crime and go to jail, and 5 times more likely to be involved in substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or whether it's drugs. And those are massive costs to our society. Not only are we having young children who are not going to be productive citizens, not only are we draining money through food stamps, home subsidies, all the other social programs we're doing that could be used to be productive, we're not investing in our youth the way we need to. So there's more to it than that, but it starts there, and I'll stop there, Jonathan, for the next question.
Well, I mean, Dr. Mullin, just to follow up on that statement that you made, if you're saying make everything equal, give everybody the right proper education, and that's the starting point. You also mentioned previously about money, but wouldn't it be fair to say that everybody has equal education? I mean, I know there's differences from the school systems throughout our country. You have many school districts that are far superior than others. But doesn't every child have the right to enter school from kindergarten up to 12th grade, whether it's a failing public school or just a fluent private school? I mean, when you say equal, giving everybody the right education, exactly what's going to make it so much equal and even better when you use that terminology?
Well, it's going to be growing up in a home where they're encouraged to read and write, because right now they're not. If you've got a single parent teenage female, and Jonathan, 67% of black children in America are born into a single parent home. 73% of them are in a single parent home after 1 year. There's another 6 or 7% of the fathers walk away and don't don't stay highly involved in the kids' lives. So, so what are we suggesting? You get a single parent teenage pregnancy, and that's what my foundation does. We support many of those young women in Colorado and also in Georgia. And what do we see? They have to work two jobs to survive. They come home exhausted. Dinner Monday is McDonald's, Tuesday Domino's, and Wednesday's out of a can. They're not encouraging the kids to get physical exercise. They live in the ghetto and in the hood, in a tough area where they're terrified to have the kids go out in the street and play because of the gang influence and shooting and the violence. And I know that seems to be a stereotype. It's not everybody, but it's such a high percentage. So what are we trying to do? Number one, have a federal minimum wage that allows that mom to work one job and raise that child. Number two, if they've got free preschool, that's another $10,000 to $15,000 a year. All of a sudden, that mom is making $40,000, $45,000. She can live in a safe, secure neighborhood and raise that child. She can actually, particularly with the organizations we support, she can learn how to cook healthy food, go to a grocery store and buy produce and fresh fruit instead of pre-canned, prepared, food that's all got all kinds of preservatives and unhealthy and it's not fresh. That's a huge difference. Sit there with that child and teach them the alphabet. 2/3 of the kids are going into school right now in America not able to read and write the alphabet and do basic sentences, not able to add 1 + 2 and make it 3. And they are behind, and they stay behind, particularly young Black boys and Latino boys where they've come from a broken home, where the parents' income and their ability to spend time with the kids is not there. And so that's the single biggest disadvantage that these kids have. And once behind, they stay behind. And they stay behind. The average difference in support, the average child in a grade school has got about $13,500 spent on them in a middle or upper class district, and it's about $3,700 per child less in a poor neighborhood. Typically in America, when you're talking about poor or low-income neighborhoods, you're talking about minority neighborhoods, unfortunately.
Well, that's true.
That's the difference.
Well, that's true what you just stated, but it sounds like to me that has to go a little bit beyond just, and it's very important that you give children a good early head start and you get parents, I guess parents is the key word from what you're stating, involved. But even for the sake of it, if it's still one parent, you get them the ability to be more heavily involved in their school, in their children's learning and development. But I don't know if that's going to correct the environment that you just say is poor, distress. You might see no businesses, no real job growth, no real job opportunities, no economic development, public safety. I don't know if you mean, well, law enforcement has to be more implemented or a better community police force. But there's so many things beyond, I think, personally, and I think, again, preparation is very important. But if you're going to prepare someone in a high crime, distress environment, or the rural Hicks of West Virginia where there's no industry, no businesses, how do you go about correcting some of those barriers to go along with making everything somewhat equal for people?
Well, it's not a 5-minute solution, Jonathan. We all know that.
Right.
It starts in the community with the community. So, if you look at, to answer the question of what's gone on with the American dream, why has it disintegrated in this country? If you look at 4 major pillars that establish values and the American values. Number one, the government. We've had, in the last 30 years, we had a president that's had oral sex in the Oval Office from an intern under his desk. That's not the morality that we want to have. So, unfortunately, today the lack of faith in our government is massive. We have to restore that. We have to have politicians whose word is their bond and who will live by those values. That's number one. Where does most of that come from? It comes from the family. The destruction of the family, we gave the statistics in the black families in terms of single parents. I don't think whoever the creator of the universe was meant for there only to be one parent. There's a reason why you can't have a baby without one male and one female. That's by design. And it's designed to have those influences in their lives, particularly young boys in these tough situations where there's a male influence that can do the discipline, and putting that emphasis on these young black women to have to raise those children is awfully tough from a financial point of view, from the stress point of view, from the, showing those role models. So family is absolutely vital. And as so much of our society in America, including the media, is counterproductive to family and family values right now. And I hear people all the time saying, I'm my child's best friend. And I go, ding, 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 ding. There's an alarm bell. The kid does not need you as a friend. The kid needs you as a parent. We need to teach kids accountability, rules, grit. We're giving participation trophies in sport. What the heck is that all about? The participation is the fun and the involvement of it. Okay, one winner, everybody else is the first loser. Learn how to win, learn how to fight, learn how to be better, learn how to focus on it. I mean, I'm not saying it's all about winning, but that's America. How are we the best country on earth? And how do I know that we are the best country on earth? Because I was born in Europe and my company worked in 11 countries around the world. And everywhere I go, people admire America. And I disagree with Donald Trump in saying, make America great again. I think we're great. There's people willing to die to get into this country. We're a great country. We're not excellent. We're not excellent in many areas, one of which is how we treat our poor people, one of which is how we treat our minorities, one of which is not giving opportunities to everybody. So I want us to be excellent again, but I think we are great. But there are real problems. And one of the problems is the 37 million people in America who are living below poverty. A national minimum wage, a free preschool for every kid instantly brings that family up to about $50,000 a year. You can live with one child, even as a single parent, in a nice living situation. And you can have the time and quality to work with the child, and particularly if the child is being taught the alphabet, taught how to read and write, taught how to do basic math, and socialized for success in school, they can then enter kindergarten at age 5, ready to succeed. And that's the foundation. Then obviously you've got to work in the community, and that's where the community leaders need to come in. And that's where, again, our biggest problem in our lower income minority communities is we don't have enough male role models in there. I used to work in Major League Baseball. Why has Major League Baseball got hardly any African Americans playing it anymore? It's because the programs in the inner city have all disappeared because there weren't the uncles and the dads and the grandparents to run those programs for baseball. That's just one example of what's going on.
Well, then again, you mentioned the part about the federal minimum wage. So that's one aspect that you're mentioning towards the money level that, okay, that's going to raise somewhat the standard of living for everybody because that's the equal federal mandated minimum wage scale.
Correct.
Now, again, this has to go through Congress and has to be passed through legislation. So are there any examples that you could pinpoint through your foundations that you have demonstrated that has had an impact towards changing people's lives that you could let people know about?
Absolutely. I moved. When I sold the business in Atlanta, I moved to Denver. And here in Denver, our federal minimum wage is $18.80 per hour. So I mean, what that is for the typical people work generally around 2,000 hours a year. That's 37,000 base. Give that single parent mom free preschool. That's ten to $15,000 additional on top of that, tax free. I mean, that means that she is de facto making $50,000 a year. So what do we see through our foundation? One of the things we see, Jonathan, is we see grandparents inheriting their kids because their kids, their grandkids, because their kids are substance abused. In one case, we have a grandfather with a 4-year-old and a 2.5-year-old grandchild that he is raising because his mother was shot in a drive-by shooting and is a quadriplegic, and she's deteriorating. It's terribly sad. But what do we see more than anything else? Through the programs we support. So I don't give money through our foundation directly to any families. We give them to provider organizations. And here in Colorado, there's a superb organization called Thriving Families. They serve 700 families in Denver, Colorado, a population that is overwhelmingly Latino and Black. There are certainly some white families there, but generally speaking, they are minorities. And what do they provide? 4 things. We provide, number one these days, post-COVID, Jonathan, is mental health of the caregiver. It's huge. The stress that particularly a teenage pregnant young girl is under. So she goes to Thriving Families. She has 3 or 4 meetings every week. She's meeting with their peers. They're talking to her. They're also pregnant. They're going through the pregnancy if it's prenatal, or they're going through the birth of their child, feeding the child, nurturing the child, and they're being educated on all of the things they need to do to be a good mom and the development of that child. So mental health of the caregiver, number one. Number two, safe, secure home. So that, like I said before, the child can go out at the front door and play in the neighborhood and not be recruited once they become 7, 8 as a drug mule for the gangs and later on into the gang itself. Number 3, quality of life, exercise, healthy eating. So we're teaching them how to cook healthy meals, fresh produce, fresh fruit, etc. Not everything pre-prepared, not everything with preservatives, not everything out of a can. And then number 4, we are paying for their tuition in daycare right now, in preschool right now, and simultaneously working with local politicians, particularly the politicians in the lower income, higher minority neighborhoods here in Colorado and in Georgia to try and get them to push for legislature. So we have free preschool in Colorado starting at age 3, but it's only up to about $5,000 a year, which is not enough. Basic quality preschool is probably at least $10,000 a year. So that's what we're working on.
And I guess as we're moving forward with a transition from our president to another president, do you think sometime the political parties kind of screw everything up between the Republicans and the Democrats, that sometimes they can't look beyond just the basic human need of a person, and without playing political favoritisms or what's politically correct? And you mentioned something about you do work with certain politicians, and it would be better in our society if the elected officials could be on board with the changes that you're looking to advocate. But if they're not going to be on board, can you move your agenda? Can you move your agenda without the political legislations that exist in our country towards what you're trying to seek?
For the most part, no.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have the politicians because the politicians drive the agenda. So, here in Colorado, I have the president of the Colorado State Senate, Senator James Coleman. Beautiful, beautiful man. Mm-hmm. African-American, represents Montbello, the minority and obviously high percentage African American district here in Colorado. And James has been incredibly supportive and really behind it. The question is, can he get a coalition of other senators and state house representatives to support him in the initiative? So we've given up on the idea of trying to get it in federally to start with. We're trying to get it in a couple of states. Governor Brian Kemp in Georgia has created a surplus there for several years in a row now, where the taxpayer money goes back. We're trying to get more of that money to support youth education in Georgia to really help us. But the biggest problem we've got is what you've just analyzed and identified, Jonathan, and that is that the politicians are party-driven. The two-party system, I don't think, works. We have no one in the middle. When in writing the book and in spending the 18 months researching for the book, one of the things that came out through Pew Research is that about 65%, 2/3 of Americans are in the middle. So they're slap in the middle as independents, as I am, or they're slightly left, slightly right. They're not far left, they're not far right. And those people, I would say, are like me in that fiscally conservative, invest in our youth, invest in education in our youth, and teach them the values and give them the support and the tools they need to be successful. Give them the chance to realize the opportunity. One of the things when I lived in Atlanta, I used to teach at Georgia State University, and about 80% of the students at Georgia State are Black. And they are first-time members of their own family going to college. So many entrepreneurs, in fashion, sports fashion, Black fashion, music, entertainment. I mean, the talents in those rooms were unbelievable, and as a follow-up to the class, I would very often work one-on-one with quite a few of them in terms of them taking their businesses to market. And it was just amazing to see. They just needed the help and the support to be successful. So I think that's it. One of the big things that we recommend in the book is a boot camp prior to entering high school. So it's a 4-year program in high school, and it's designed to address, many of the issues that you're talking about, Jonathan, and that we would pay the kids to go to a summer camp. And in that summer camp, they would learn how to be an adult, how to be an American. They would learn black, brown, yellow, white, how to get along. Rich, poor, doesn't matter, how to get along. And they would learn to listen. They would learn to have a different perspective. They would learn what it takes to be an adult. And for a lot of the young men, quite frankly, a strong message would be, keep it in your pants. Stop getting these young girls pregnant. You're ruining the young girl's life. You're ruining the life of the child, almost certainly, because they're at such a massive disadvantage. So be responsible, take responsibility, eat healthier, exercise, look at what you want to achieve in your career. And then sophomore, junior, and senior summers before they go into school, they would work, they would be paid. Therefore, they would be paid the minimum wage. So by the time they're 18, they would have earned $20,000. We'll go and get banks to give them 7.5% interest if they'll keep it in those banks. So by the time they are 18, they could have $25,000. They could have a generational wealth in all of these generations that don't have it right now. They could buy their own apartment. They could start their own entrepreneurial business. And if they did that for the 4 years in high school, we'd give them $15,000 a year voucher for them to either become a professionally certified plumber, esthetician, beautician, electrician, whatever it may be, HVAC engineer, or go to college. So they would have no student debt. They would be 25 years old, qualified, and able to make a really good quality of life, $75,000 a year base salary from being a professional, certified, or college grad. Makes all the difference in the world. and then go back. Obviously, you buy an apartment for their mom, yeah, and really have a completely different trajectory in life and have gone through grade school, middle school, and high school without needing all the social service support that drains so much off the economy. That's the essence of the book. And obviously, it takes community support services, male and female role models, more than we have right now to really help that happen.
Well, Dr. Mullin, as we're winding down, I mean, the one thing I want to leave off and let people know, or just clarify so there's no misconceptions, you still feel that America has the American dream. It has the so-called things that could give you the American dream in your life. The problem which you're
Yes.
trying to correct is making the American dream attainable for all people, which sounds like that's going to be the harder part to correct more
That
than
is
more than saying
absolutely.
right, right.
Yeah, you nailed it, Jonathan. That's the issue. There are people who are attaining the American dream despite dreadful circumstances against it. Who's going to say Tyler Perry is not attaining the American dream? He is. And he's done it on his own back with his own talent and his own, ability to build relationships and connections with people who invested and supported him. And then he's been able to invest and support in his own right. And when I lived in Atlanta, whether it was Usher or, Big Boy or Outkast, Ludacris, all the people that I knew from the music and entertainment business, Tim Tucker, etc., good friends that were able to provide that for themselves. But it's just not enough people. We need to make it way more available so that poverty is very much a minority and a limited minority. I'm not talking about, blacks and Latinos. I'm talking about very few people have to live below the poverty line. And
But
to do that, it is money and education invariably as the ways to the platform to build and help people get out of that situation.
well, Dr. Mullen, obviously you have your statistical data to back up what you're saying. So if people come to you contradicting what you're saying and about Tyler Perry, and let's just say President or former President Barack Obama, used to be a time you had no examples in the United States, throughout this country and throughout the world, that you could believe that a black person can become president. It still hasn't happened to a female president, but still, you don't have that so-called argument that you could say, well, this country here in America will never have a black president, because you used to always hear that as a child and other people from my generations growing up. Tyler Perry, a person that can own, as you just mentioned, his own television and film production studio. Could that sometime possibly hurt the cause when people can come back at you and saying these people are able to achieve the so-called American dream? Look at what they've done. So I don't want to hear any excuses. Or do you think people wouldn't be so close-minded to actually think that way?
Well, there'll be some who are, Jonathan. I mean, we're always talking about, again, talk about the 65% middle Americans, independents, reasonable people, warm-hearted, socially conscious. We're the most generous country on earth in terms of any national disaster that happens anywhere in the world. We give, we support. So generally speaking, there are going to be people who don't think that way. But, it's only 25 years ago that we actually had a billionaire black person. Bob Johnson, when I was at the NBA and he bought the Charlotte Bobcats, because of black educational television. And how did he become a billionaire? Because people gave him programming, somewhat out of sympathy and somewhat out of, hey, there needs to be a black educational network. So they gave him the programming for pennies on the dollar, and he was able to build a multi-billion-dollar business. So, now, of course, we have loads of black billionaires, still nowhere near what we've got in terms of white or Caucasian billionaires. So I think that argument is bogus. And, it's what the hell skin color got to do with it anyway?
Right, right.
It's an American it's a young American with talent and with passion and with enthusiasm and with a dream. It's Martin Luther King's dream that we're all equal and we're not judged by the color of our skin, but by our character and what we do and what we develop. And I think I'm optimistic at 2 months now from the last election that there's a lot more positivism and optimism in the country. I think that the victory was by such a strong margin that many reasonable Democrats were like, oh my God, our policies on all the things that we were fighting for doesn't work. Stop fighting against deportation of immigrants who are criminals. I mean, DACA, no one wants to deport, no reasonable person wants to deport a young immigrant who was brought here by their parent and is not documented, and they're now 21 years old, they've lived as an American. You're going to send them out? Of course you're not. No reasonable person's going to do that. That's not going to happen. So, take the criminals, the people that are committing these vicious and dreadful crimes, get them out of the country. Control the borders, have an immigration policy. I'm an immigrant. I got deported. When I applied for permanent residency in the state of Massachusetts, the Department of Labor deliberately conspired to not give me a work permit, to the point where when I applied to immigration, finally having got the work permit, and it took Senator Ted Kennedy calling the Department of Labor secretary and saying, cut the crap. University of Massachusetts wants this guy. Give him his labor certification that he's entitled to, because no American was qualified for the job that I took in creating the sports business program there. And so eventually, but deported for six months with 3 American kids, and so I look at what's going on now and go, this is insane. What we're allowing people in with court dates 5, 6, 7 years from now. I drive 2 blocks from my house in Denver, and all the young Venezuelan men are at the traffic lights washing windshields because they need work because we didn't give them a work permit. How do you let people in and not give them a work permit? So the truth of the matter is there are simple solutions to answer your question, Jonathan, but the politicians are so hell-bent on, I'm not going to let you as a Republican have your way and do something good because it's not going to help me in the next election. We're Americans. Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan would go out and have a state dinner, drink way too much wine, and agree on what they would agree on for the best of the country, and then still have some of the differences. But the majority of what they agreed on was for the best of the country. We have to come back to that again because we don't have that right now. And that's what I'm working with Senator James Coleman in the state of Colorado, trying to get reasonable things that are focused on education, minimum wage, quality of life, and giving young people the chance of having the American dream.
Well, Dr. Mullin, that's an excellent way to end your final assessment of this particular program. As always, though, I'd still like to ask the guests if there's any brief last words that they would like to leave with the audience. Feel free to do so.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. There is one other thing, the extreme toxicity between right and left has to stop. And I offer up in the book a suggestion, and it's called PAL, P-A-L. Jonathan, you're now my pal. I'm your pal. And PAL stands for peace and love. Let's start greeting each other as pals. Good morning, pal. How are you? Peace and love. We all want to live in peace and love. Let's offer each other peace and love. Let's live in peace and love. And let's listen to other people. You're not evil. You're not, a fascist. You're not Hitler. You're not a deplorable. All these labels have got to go. You have a different opinion to me. I respect your opinion. We agree to disagree. Now let's focus on what we can do together to make America a better place and to create the opportunity for everyone to realize the American dream and live in the pursuit of happiness.
Well, Dr. Mullin, it was a pleasure to meet you. It was a pleasure to interview you this morning on the Face to Face show. Sounds like to me you're a true champion for what you believe in, and I'm pretty sure we're going to cross paths again sometime in 2025 with your very impressive background in many different areas of business and knowledge. And again, it was a pleasure to have you as a guest on the Face to Face talk show this morning on the AccessTV.org network, and wish you the very best of luck in what you're fighting for.
Thank you so much for having me on. We're now pals, and we'll do our best to make the world a better place. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Take care.
Okay, you too, and you're welcome. All right. Okay, this is Jonathan Small. I just enjoyed hosting this edition of Face to Face with a very intellectual, prominent individual who has many different areas of expertise, from sports to knowledge to business, consultant, international involvement, Dr. J. Mullin. And I hope you, as the viewers, was able to find something very relevant and informative in this particular show. It's good to be back here again for January 2025. Do have a face-to-face show plan and book for next week. Just got to finalize a few things. And until I see you again, for people out there, have a very blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.